everyone. My name is Jesse Chason with Lisa Blanchard as the host of Airing Addiction.
I share often my journey started on this campus. Got sober as a client here, just like you.
I really do see phenomenal change.
Always hope. I've seen situations that on the surface look impossible become possible.
Doing this podcast is to share those recovery stories, be honest about what the challenges are and have some real conversations, but kind of share that out on the airwaves.
Morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Airing Addiction. If you're listening live on Facebook or later today on any platform that podcasts are on, it is Tuesday, May 23rd. We are really excited to have our guest on today, and Lisa will introduce him here in a moment. But I just wanted to take a moment in opening and give a shout out to Tristan. Sometimes doing this via Zoom and talking into cameras, you wonder, does this message really get out? Do people really hear this? And this weekend I was reminded that people really do hear this. And Tristan, I met him over the weekend and he said, hey, I was just poking around on YouTube and I happened to find Airing Addiction and I noticed it was you. And I listened to Lisa, the episode with Daryl. So this is like the third episode in a row where we talk about Daryl, and Daryl introduced us to our great guest today. So I'll hand it over to Lisa to introduce Matt.
So I'm really excited. Thanks, Jesse, for that introduction, to introduce our guest today. This is going to be a really great conversation. I've listened to several podcasts and other media that our guest today has been on. So I think you guys are all really in for a treat because today we have Matt Ganem. And Matt describes himself as an addict in recovery, a father, a recovery advocate, a poet, and is the CEO owner, no big deal, just CEO owner of Aftermath Addiction Treatment Center. So Matt, we're so happy to have you on. Our favorite thing to do is to have kind of recovery stories and really talk about what's possible, but have real conversations. And I think based on what I've heard from you before, like that is what you specialize in, is real conversation. So with that, I'd love for you just to share with us kind of as much of your story as you want to this morning.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be on the show. Thank you for having me. Dow's a great human being doing some amazing work out there, really, trying to shatter the stigma. I think a lot of us putting these type of videos, podcasts, throwing it up on YouTube, social media, we're leveraging these different platforms to like really get the word out there. Because I know back when I was getting high, you didn't have conversations like this. There wasn't people out there sharing like, hey, I'm a drug addict. I changed my life around. Now look at where I'm at today and the type of success that I've been able to achieve. So, I can't even believe where I'm at today. First and foremost, I'm a grateful recovering heroin addict. On April 21st, I just celebrated 17 years in recovery. I'm extremely blessed that I got this at a young age. I got clean when I was 21 years old. And before I get into my story, I'm just going to talk about like some of the things that just happened recently. And so I bought a new house. I'm moving into it. So I'm going through some of the clutter, trying to purge some of the things. And I had these trash bags and these bins from like the different moves that I've had. And what's crazy is I'm 38 years old and going through these bins with the pictures, the photographs, letters from my friends that have passed away. It's like my whole entire generation is gone. Like all the kids that I grew up with, when you're flipping through, old photo albums from high school and stuff like that, it's really heartbreaking how many people didn't make it. And it also gives me like, when you look at things, it just puts things in perspective that I was one of the few people that were able to make it out. And, it's just crazy. It's crazy how, the opiate epidemic, overdoses, suicides, murder, the lifestyle, everything that's associated with like using and abusing drugs, really took some beautiful people. And, also just blessed that I'm where I'm at today, that I have two beautiful kids. And, and then again, it brought me back to when I was younger. So going into my story, I grew up in a broken home. I was always the kid trying to get attention from anything, whether it was negative or positive. I was addicted to reaction, I would say. Um, you know, always trying to fit in, always trying to be cool. The unspoken peer pressure was something that was um, very, very difficult for me. Um, First time I did anything, I was 12 years old. My buddy stole a pack of cigarettes from his mother, and we were on our way to school. And one by one, he handed it to each and every one of us. And we sat on the corner, yeah. Coughing up a lung. Oh, I don't know what just happened there.
I think we're just having a
Little,
moment of technical difficulties. Lisa
Yeah.
was frozen and tried to
Yeah.
jump on, but you're good now, Matt.
all right, cool. So there's a little feedback, but basically, when I was 12 years old, the unspoken peer pressure, I felt like if I didn't smoke that cigarette right then and there, my friends would ridicule me, chastise me, banish me out of the group. So I ended up, lighting the cigarette up, coughing up a lung on the corner like I was a cool kid. And that kind of followed me with every substance that I ended up trying. It started off with a cigarette, then it went to alcohol. Somebody handed me a beer, and again, that unspoken peer pressure. Like, if I didn't do this, my group of friends wouldn't hang out with me, whatever. So, I followed suit. My freshman year, I got kicked out of 2 schools. I was experimenting with mushrooms, ecstasy, Special K. I was getting in trouble. I was getting into fights. I was just, completely unhinged. Just anything to like not be me, to not be in my own head, to not be in my own skin, like just anything to try kind of like numb reality. And my sophomore year, I ended up in my 3rd high school, and it was like my first period of not doing any drugs. Like, I quit smoking cigarettes, I quit getting high. I played varsity basketball, I played varsity baseball. I had like a 2-year stretch, 18-month stretch, I would say, in high school, where like I was off of everything. I wasn't getting in trouble anymore. I had like a chins put on me. If anybody has any idea what that is, it's like, when your parents can't deal with you and they go to the courts. Because I kept, whatever I was, I didn't follow the, my mother's rules were not really applying to me. And then my junior year is when I got introduced to this thing called Oxycontin. And I was 16. I had some colleges looking at me for baseball. I was like a half decent athlete. And once I found, we were at like a house party, and the same thing happened. I was around a group of friends. They broke it out. I had tried perks before, and basically it was described to me as like, this is like taking 4 or 5 perks at a time. And, again, one by one, everybody did it. When it came time for me to do it, I just did it. I didn't have the courage to say no. I didn't, I couldn't walk away. And then, that I ended up sniffing a line, and that first line was like heaven on earth. All these other drugs had like certain side effects right after you take them, like ecstasy. You wake up and your back is killing, suicidal, feels like you have burn holes in your brain. When you drink, you're hungover, you're hugging the toilet, praying to the porcelain god. When I first did an OC80, there was no side effects, there was no consequences. It was just like, this warm feeling of happiness, of confidence, of, just everything I was looking for in the substances that I was trying. And then right from there, like the initial time I did it, it was like, this is what I'm chasing every day. And in the beginning, it was easier to get 80s than it was to get booze. For us. So a lot of my friends, we all gravitated to start doing these pills, and it started like on a Friday, Saturday thing, then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then Monday came around, and it was like, all right, how can we get $40 each? We'll split an 80. My mother ended up throwing me out of the house because I was using, I wasn't listening to her rules. I was coming home at all hours of the night. I wasn't going to school. All those old behaviors that I like kind of, for about 18 months was able to show up at school, to not get high, to do the right thing, kind of went out the window. And my mother she got fed up with me. And one morning I was out on a bender all night, and I came home, and she was just like, you need to pack your things and leave. And at that time, it wasn't like, hey, Matt, you need to get out of this house forever. It was more like, I can't handle the way you are, so I'm setting a boundary, or you need to leave. And all I heard in my head was, I don't want you. I don't love you. You need to leave. And I got this thing that like when I feel unwanted, it's like I'm out. And I threw my clothes in a trash bag and I took off. And you know, again, when my mother said it, I don't believe she wanted me out of the house forever. But the way I took it, I was gone. And I started couch hopping at friends' houses. It was the summer of my junior to senior year. And I'd stay on the couch at a friend's house, I'd sleep in their basement. I'd get all banged up, and until their parent tried to set rules for me, like, all right, if you're gonna stay here, we need you in by this time or that time, and then I would bounce to the next place to try to push the limits of what I could do. Running amok out in the streets. At this point, I was selling drugs. I was doing whatever I had to get high. And I ended up me and two of my buddies, Sparky and Dougie, we ended up sharing, basically sleeping on couches and in bedrooms in the Clarendon Hill projects in Somerville, and there was no rules. The woman that we were living with was basically like, this is a free for all. She let us sell drugs in the house, coming and going as we please, and I was like 16, 17 at this time. So I thought I was living like the high life, like I can, like I was a grown man at that time, which again, going back to like reminiscing over those pictures, I look at them and I was like a baby face, toothpick, thinking I was grown and all that. And ultimately, I got kicked out of my third high school because, behaviors, selling drugs, getting in trouble. And, my disease just progressed. At this point, I'm selling, I'm lying, cheating, stealing. I ended up getting my own apartment. The apartment got raided by the OC task force. Just running amok through the streets. And the people that I looked up to at that time, like they were all older than me. They all sold drugs. They had nice cars, and that's like who I wanted to be. I wanted to be this badass. I wanted to emulate this like tough guy persona. And when I was high, when I was doing 80s, that's what I felt. I felt like I was untouchable. I felt like I could go up to the hottest girl in the room and hit on her. I felt like I could fight Mike Tyson and win. Like literally felt like Superman on these pills. And ultimately it led to my downfall. So I had this apartment, it gets raided, I get evicted, back to couch hopping with friends after like, you feel like you get to, I had this spot for a little while where we all partied and did drugs and got high. And, when you're a drug dealer, everybody wants to be around you because they're going to get a deal or, whatever. And, my buddy Slattery let me move in. His mom let me move into his crib. And on September 1st, 2004, he committed suicide. And I woke up to his mother and his sister screaming, and I had to go into the bathroom and take him down. And before that, we had lost some people. We had lost some friends to suicide. Suicide was like, there was like 5 suicides in an 18-month span during this period. And we were all like living like we were untouchable. Like jail wasn't serious, death wasn't serious. And like, going through a situation like that and the trauma that you experience when I held my best friend and his body was frozen cold. And it's something that's burned into my brain that unfortunately will never, I'll always remember that. And after that happened, I was on some, I don't care if I live or die. I don't care who I hurt. I'm going to inflict pain on the world, and I'm going to numb my pain and get as high as possible. And I spiraled into a worse, my addiction just got worse and worse. There were periods of times I was trying to get, I go to detox, I do the spin wash, think I need to get it together. I get out, go right back to it. Then OC80s kind of got pulled off the market. Pharmacies were getting robbed in the area. At this point, me and my friends, we were holding up corner stores, just doing whatever it takes to get high. The crimes are getting worse. And I got introduced to heroin. And before, when I was doing 80s, I remember going to detox and looking at the dope fiends like, I'm better than you. I know what's in this pill. I'll never do what you do. I'm never going to go through what the sniffing dope, shooting heroin. Like, I always thought I was better than, and detox, that better than attitude. And, there was a couple days you couldn't get any 80s on the street. And this kid came by with a little baggie of brown powder. And I was so deathly ill, it didn't matter what was in that bag, I was doing it. And once you did it, the stigma of heroin just went out the window, right? After that first line, and I got as high as I probably did, sniffing 5 or 6 80s with like one little line. I was like, why am I wasting my time, with all this money on pills? Like, this is economics comes into play. It's like, all right, I can get $40 and it can last a little bit longer. Like, all right, I'm gonna rock with that. And out of like my group of friends, I was one of the first people that started sniffing it. And when that happens, that better than attitude kicks in. So like all my friends that are still doing 80s, or maybe they weren't as bad as me and they could only do it on the weekend, started separating. And then I started, just running harder. And a lot of my story when I was using was being the monkey that sold bananas. I was a drug dealer. I always had people that I would sell for. And at the time, looking back, I know I was delusional during that time, thinking I was some big bad drug dealer where I wasn't. I was literally selling to supply my habit. But back at 19, 18, 20, you know what I mean? Like I probably looked at it a lot different. Like, oh, I need to make money and this is how, whatever. But basically I did all my profits. So when you do all your profits, you don't last as a drug dealer too long. And, ultimately, I went from 80s to sniffing heroin. I got arrested for Class A distribution in 2005. And when that happened, the next step in my progression happened. Like I was able to sniff as much dope as I wanted to because I was selling. Well, when you get arrested and you can't afford it anymore, all of a sudden the needle comes into play. And that I'm better than you, I will never do this. This is a yet. All those yets get checked off. And I remember the same kid who introduced me to the bag of dope was the first person that shot me up. And we went to a pizza shop in Medford, and I was in the bathroom and I held my arm out like this because I hate needles, even though I'm covered in tattoos. But I stuck my arm out and I just looked the other way and he injected me. And again, that was like another feeling of pure euphoria. And it was again, like, why am I wasting hundreds of dollars sniffing when this is the move? This is what I wanted. And at this time, I had a girl that was pregnant, claiming that I was the father. I ended up doing some jail time. I got locked up because of the crimes I was committing. I had some opportunities to get clean. My PO really tried to go to bat for me. My PO at the time, I had played youth sports with his son and his 2 nephews. So he always looked at me as like the 12-year-old Matt that played basketball and baseball. So he was giving me all these opportunities, and I got arrested for like the 6th time on trial. And he just threw his hands up like, I'm done with him, lock him up, violate him, and take him off my caseload because I can't do this anymore with him. And so I'm in jail telling everybody in there I got to get clean. I got this baby on the way, and the baby was born the day before I got out of jail. Right from jail, I go to the hospital, pictures with the baby. And about 2 months later, I get a DNA test and find out I'm not the father. And it ended up being one of my best friends that was the father. And, when that type of thing happens, I was trying to hold it together during that period, even though I was still getting high, I was chipping away. But it was another moment of like, all right, I'm not a father anymore. I got no responsibilities. Like, I went off, smoking crack and shooting dope. And basically everything came to a head. And, for the last, 9 months of my run, 8-9 months of my run, I was trying to commit suicide every night of using. I was so sick and tired of waking up, dope sick, pissing out my ass. But my apologies. And
no, keep it real today.
Up, curled up, dying. I weighed 130 pounds, soaking wet, mad at the world. My family was done with me. They wouldn't talk to me because every time I call them, it was, I'm sorry for all the pain I caused, but can I borrow $100? Can I sleep in your house for the night, even though I'll steal some jewelry? My friends were sick and tired of letting me stay with them because I would steal their wallet and help them look for it. Like I was a scumbag when I got high. And I treated any and everybody as a means to an end to get my fix. And at this time, I burnt every bridge around me till I was on an island. For a period, my best friend, Eddie, was sleeping head to toe with me on a futon. Through drug court, he got thrown into this program, the Hamilton House in Dorchester. And he knew I was trying to end my life. Like I was on this suicide mission. And he tried to get me to go to this halfway house every day. Like, this is what you need to do. And this place is great. It's such a good time. Where it wasn't, it was awful. It was like a TC. And I ended up going to visit him with his sister. And this is how like off and not caring about anybody I was. I show up absolutely mangled. And I'm bringing his little baby sister with me, and I'm nodding out in a recovery home with 20 guys, 26 guys trying to get their life together. And I couldn't hold it together for the 40-minute visit that we had because I was so lost in my own like addiction. And, he looked at me and he's like, bro, you're going to die. Like, you need to get help. Like, you really got to try to do something different. And, I ended up going back. I was living with his mother at the time, and I was giving her dope as my way to like pay rent to be able to stay in this rooming house with her. And, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks after that, there was a morning I was dope sick, dying, hadn't showered in weeks, didn't brush my teeth, same clothes, and just like miserable as she's shooting up in front of me. And she turned to me and she goes, Matt, you got an effing problem. You need to go and get help. And then proceeded to take the one fix that I needed and put it in her arm. And I remember I went from there to the bathroom and looked in the mirror for like the first time in a long time. And I couldn't tell you who was looking back at me. It was this skeleton. I looked like Skeletor. Black under my eyes, face sunken in, teeth were yellow, like just looked like death. And for that moment, I finally had just an ounce of I want to live more than I wanted to die. And from there, I ended up going right to detox. And like, it's funny, before that, every time you call a detox, especially back in the day, not so much now, but it's like, all right, no beds, call back in an hour. They didn't help you. There was no sympathy. It was, hey, is there a bed? Nope, call back in an hour. So you call a couple times and then you would give up. Like, oh, I tried. This is my honest effort. I called 3 times in 3 hours, no bed. I'm going to go get high. Well, this day, just magically, I called up and it was like, yeah, we got a bed coming right now. Right? So I ended up getting there. I've been in programs before, right? But every time I step foot through the doorway and I'm 19 in a house full of 30-year-old grown men that are like, when I'm high, I don't care. I have no fear, but you remove the drugs and I'm this scared, insecure little boy trapped inside a young man's body. So fight or flight would kick in. I look at all these larger human beings than me that I feel like I'm, whatever. And fight or flight would kick in and I would take off. I was a big time runner of programs early on. And, this time I get the detox. And then I called the halfway house my buddy was in, and they set up an interview for me to come in. And I went from detox to the shelter. I had to stay in the shelter for about a week. And then I get to the Hamilton House with a Stop and Shop bag full of everything that I owned. And I wasn't even supposed to get to bed that day. Bob Brown came in. What effing idiot brought their clothes? This isn't a hotel. Ba, 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 ba. And right there, like I had warrants out. I was on trial. When he came in storming around talking bad about me, I was like, I'm about to go get high and turn myself in. Like, I'm probably better off in jail anyway at this point. And he brings everybody else that was there in first. Then he brings me in and he goes, well, where are you going to go if you leave here? I go, I'm going to go down to Fields Corner, get a bag of dope, get high and turn myself in. Like, this is my last stop. I'm tired. I'm run down and I can't do this anymore. So he didn't tell me to leave, but he didn't tell me to stay. He was just like, all right, I'll talk to you in a minute. And that was probably like 1 o'clock. I was there early. I was there like 8 in the morning, maybe. And so now it's 1 o'clock. I'm still there. He tells me to go sit at the table where they do groups and have dinner and everything. Well, he never told me to leave, so I didn't leave. I just sat there. I had nowhere else to go anyway. So, and about 6, 7 o'clock, he comes in with a pillow and a blanket and he goes, you want this. I'm going to give you a chance. Not only did he give me a chance, he also went to court with me to turn myself in and was like, this kid's been in the system since he was a young teenager. Like, let's give him a chance. Like, clearly everything he's ever done is drug related. I didn't have any violent crimes that I was arrested for. Everything was around like selling, stealing, using, possession of a hypodermic needle, all of that. And, fortunately, for some reason, they shined a light on me and gave me that opportunity. And I went through the Hamilton house, and then I ended up pleading out and signed like a pretty good deal, that like a 5-year suspended deal. Had to complete the halfway house, 18 months in a sober house, color code. I don't miss I was on red, so I had to go like 3 times a week. No license because I lost my license for 5 weeks. So I had to literally leave job sites to go take urines, or I would get locked up over this. And through all those hoops of fire, like that was like the foundation, having that hanging over my head, having a little bit of clean time, going through the Hamilton house, and like those big giant guys, some of the older guys took me under their wing, and like we started doing cool things that like a lot of my life was surrounded by drugs. Like I didn't do fun things because I was getting high, or I was selling, or hanging in courtyards of projects and hallways. We went to the beach every Saturday. And that was like the first time I'd ever done things outside of using in a long time. And in that halfway house, I rediscovered a love of mine. I wrote poetry as a kid. When I was getting high, I wrote thinking I was going to be the Tony Montana, the Oxycontin game. I was like a rapper when I was jammed out of my mind. But in the halfway house, I started writing poetry again because at 21 years old, like I'm 130 pounds. Again, I'm still terrified of the world, and I don't know how to communicate. I don't know how to express myself. So I couldn't go to the guy who had done 10 years in prison and be like, hey, buddy, I'm really having a bad day. Like, can we talk about it? Over fear of when you're weak or you appear weak, people take advantage of you, they put you down, whatever. So what I would do is I would put my thoughts, feelings, shame, guilt, experiences down on a piece of paper. So every day I'm taking the train to work, I'm writing poems in the groups, I'm writing poetry. Like I still have notebooks. Again, going through some of the things in storage bins in this move I'm taking. I found, I'm reading old poems, and like it brings me right back to that time and place where I was in there, which is pretty cool. And poetry ended up turning into this huge platform for me. It started off as just sharing with some friends, sharing my recovery poetry, and then it started getting noticed. I started putting it on, social media platforms. I started getting invited to to speak and to perform. And that opened up a door to like the advocacy work, or like speaking at the State House, putting up videos on YouTube. I put out a book in 2011 called The Shadow of an Addict. Before that, I had signed a book deal, and it ended up falling through. Going to like recovery isn't all sunshine and rainbows. It's not always just an upward trend. I've had like a lot of real bad ups. Real bad downs, real good ups through my journey. And when I started putting the poetry out and I got noticed and I got a publishing company interested in signing this deal, I thought I was going to be a New York Times bestseller. Like, oh, I made it. Oh, these little poems are going to take me to the top of the world. And nothing happened out of it. They put me on the shelf, dropped me. But one of the beautiful things in that failure is part of that contract was, oh, you have to speak publicly. You have to do a public book signing, which the number one fear in America is public speaking. And I'm a psychopath, like, because whatever, we're perfectionists and we want to make sure that we do a good job. So I started doing open mics before I was supposed to have this, book release of Carried by Wings of Protection and perform some poetry to try to perfect it. And because of that, I ended up starting to develop an even larger following. I started going to places, performing, traveling. I've performed across the country now. I've featured in New York City at like world famous poetry spots. I've done a ton of recovery events out here, DC, documentaries, news clips, like a whole bunch of things that probably wouldn't happen if that failure didn't happen. And then there was a point in time I was going to quit. My best friend, Dougie, who passed away in 2015, he gave me the money to self-publish the book. And in 2012, I was selling books out of my car like I was selling drugs, and meeting people, sliding a book out the window and taking $15 that probably cost me the gas money to get there, and just hustling. One of the things that I've learned and that I like to try to show people in recovery now, working in the field, is like when you turn that hustle, that grind of like what we do to get high every day into something positive, there's nothing that we can't accomplish. And like, I know for me, like I'm a shining example of that. Like I've hustled for a good life, grinded, sacrificed, and like to such an obsessive, insane level that like I've turned my life into like something that feels like a movie. So I put the book out. Won 2013 the Mass Poetry Awards. I won Book of the Year. 2013 New England Urban Award, Male Spoken Word Artist of the Year. 2015, I was given the Recovery Advocate of the Year by the Massachusetts Organization of Addiction and Recovery. 2016, I opened up a treatment center that, for an uneducated convicted felon, is pretty effing cool. When you look at the amount of people that didn't believe me, said I couldn't do it, and that thought it would fail, and then turn it into one of the best programs in the state, and a community that people got well in. What's beautiful, like I was just at a graduation for a kid that went through there 6 years ago, and he's on his way to med school. Like I've been able to do some pretty cool things. Now from there, I had a bad falling out, and another like bottom of my recovery was hit. I build up, I get to like what I feel like is the top of the mountain, and a Fortune 500 company takeover kind of happened, and I got removed from a place that was like my baby. Had a falling out with a partner. He went about it in a certain way, and I literally was left with nothing. And in that moment, when you get to a point, I bought a house, I bought some sober houses, I've done some pretty cool things. My son thinks of me as like the world, and I had to tell him that, we might have to sell our house and step back. We might have to sacrifice for a few months because I don't know where money's coming in. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. But one thing about getting clean, especially with the way I got clean and what I went through, is I believe anything you throw in front of me, I'm going to be able to overcome it. I'm going to get through it, around it. Like you can't put an obstacle that I don't feel like I'm going to get through. And it was a beautiful life lesson to teach my son in that moment that I will never quit and I will always be there. And, and I ended up opening Aftermath Addiction Treatment Center as the, as the bounce back from that bottom. And it's an amazing program with amazing staff. I feel like we have the best staff in the business, a real community feel. And we've been open for like 2.5 years. And, I'm grateful that I get to wake up every day with a purpose. When you get to help people that struggle with addiction, coming from where we come from, and you see them turn their life around, you see them when they're hopeless and they feel like nothing's going to work, and you get to see them succeed, thrive, get everything back, get their kids back, get their wife back, their husband back. There's a guy that, one of my favorite stories of people that I've been able to help. He was a working addict. This was at the other place that he came through, but working addict, wife had no idea, ended up ODing behind the wheel. He was a union guy, construction. Wife lost her ish, and was going to sell the house. You're never going to see the kids again, whatever. This man cried in my arms. And I remember when he graduated that program, was in a sober house, and then she let him stay on the couch. And he called me when she let him get back in the big bed. And he was like a little kid, all giddy, like, oh, she let me back in the big bed. Everything, it's all working out. Because I told him, like, I can't tell you the results. You put the work in, you stay clean. Like, there's no telling what's gonna happen and how your life is gonna be. But I promise you, if you get high, if you continue doing it, everything is gonna completely crumble and fall apart. And when you follow that, the guidance and advice, and put the work in, like the returns are beautiful. And like my life is like that. Where I'm at today, because I just sped through a whole bunch of stuff. But I have 2 beautiful kids. I have a 9-year-old daughter that terrifies me because she's just like me in a female form, always getting in trouble, very manipulative, a liar, because she's always getting in trouble and it's never her fault for some strange reason. I got a son that's about to be 15 years old that I've had custody for since he was 7 years old. Which obviously in Massachusetts is very difficult for a single man to have custody of your child, which again, I wouldn't have if it wasn't for recovery. Like I wouldn't be able to be the type of person if things didn't work out the way they did. And, I got 2 dogs. I just bought a beautiful new home. I own 2 sober houses in Mass, a treatment center. I opened up a treatment center in Delaware with a good friend of mine, Brandon Novak, Redemption Addiction Treatment Center. Own some properties down there, own an office building. you know, I live a life that I have to pinch myself at times to be like, is this even real? Like when I wake up sometimes, I'm just like just full of gratitude. Like that's a big thing for me in recovery is just staying in a state of gratitude and trying to look at the silver lining and everything. Because I was negative for a long time. Even in recovery, like I really had a real negative light on everything. And even in like my poetry, if you follow my writer's page, or a lot of it's very like rough and raw and pain filled. Where nowadays I live a lot more of like, trying to be grateful for everything, even bad things that happen to me. It's like, a couple years ago, I thought the worst thing in the world happened to me and ended up being the best thing that ever did. You know what I mean? And trying to take every opportunity and bounce back from it, trying to inspire and show people that they can get clean and they can do some amazing things, that they don't have to settle with, I'm going to be average, or I'm just going to do this. Like you can accomplish amazing things. And like that's something I've always strived to be like an example of, and not trying to brag or do or say anything from like the ego. More so like I worked my ass off to get to where I'm at, and anybody out there, like you have the ability to do that too, whether it's going back to school, whether it's applying yourself in a sales commission position, business oriented. Like there's so many endless opportunities for people like us, and nobody in the world outworks an addict or an alcoholic. There's literally nobody out there that will put in the work or the effort that we do, whether it's getting high or drinking. What we will do to make sure that we get that next fix, that next drink, you turn that into some positive effort, and it's an insane return on what you can get. So that was about as quick as the cliff notes I possibly could. I'm sure it'd be better probably having a discussion with you guys from that point
Well,
on.
now we can still have a discussion, right? We can take a little extra time, Matt. I mean, I wasn't going to stop you at all through that, right? Like, I think one of the questions I have for you, and then I'd love Jesse to jump in, because I think, Jesse has his lived experience and Jess got his master's degree. So nice. I think like that, your points earlier, I think are things that probably resonate very well with Jesse. But so looking at your poetry, like that was one of the questions I had for you, kind of looking at the different things that you post or that are available on your page, just finding those storage bins of some of those old notebooks. Like that's just such a gift in some ways, right? That you put down on paper where you were at in that moment, in the tough days, in the early recovery days, in the later recovery days. And I'd love for you to say just a little more about what that progression looks like for you. Like, what does your poetry look like now versus in the early days?
Now it's a little harder for me to write. I will say that. I draw from pain as a muse. I don't have a lot of pain anymore. And it's really difficult nowadays when I try to go or even like get into that mind state to write a piece, I'm like, your life's great. Why are you complaining? What are you bitching about? Like, look at, it's a beautiful day. I am my own boss. I can go take a day off if I want to, or I can go, like I live like an incredible life, where a lot of that early on, like through recovery, I went from living in a sober house to living in a rooming house to sharing an apartment, like always trying to make it. Like when I lived in Rosendale for a few years and my son had to sleep in my bed with me because I couldn't afford a bigger place. You know what I mean? Like it's easy to draw on pain when you're in those types of situations. The progression from writing though, like going back, it is cool that I literally can read a place and I can pretty much go back to when I wrote that, not for every piece, but for most of them, and be like, I wrote it there. That's how I was feeling. That's what I was going through. That's what I mean on certain lines. And it's wild. And then sometimes I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I don't even know who wrote this, even though obviously it's in my notebook, which at the time I'm probably like, this is garbage. This isn't good enough. Because we are super critical of ourselves, right? I'm my own worst critic, to the point that like I'll write some things and I don't think they're that good. But then it seems like every couple of years I'll go back to them and I'm like, wow, that was, that was clever wordplay. That was a cool metaphor. That was really good, And at the time of writing it, I don't necessarily always have that same feeling of being involved in a piece. And then some that translate to like perform it. One of the cool things, I didn't get into the depths of it, but when I first started doing open mics, I read, through a piece of paper into a microphone in front of a crowd of 4 people. And in 2018, I performed at Recovery Fest with around 15,000 people in the crowd, which is pretty crazy when they hang on. I don't use mute. It's just it's my words that I write when I'm alone that help me. And I'm on stage. And if you've seen the video for Miracle, it's a call and response piece, and having 15,000 people screaming Miracle back at me during it is one of like the coolest moments. You know what I mean? Like I just, I've had some pretty dope moments. I performed at the White House. A guy spotted me in the crowd that I'd done a documentary with and was just like, "Hey, we want you to perform," and then hands me a megaphone or whatever in front of like a couple thousand people right outside the White House for the Fed Up rally in 2015. It's like I've had some pretty cool things that stem just from writing. And writing, I write when I'm alone, and it's to help me. And it's had this huge, pretty big impact. Which one of the big things that I've always been driven by is leaving a legacy that my kids will be proud of. That I made like a positive impact and a difference in the world when I'm gone. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of that so far. So,
yeah, I'd say so, Matt. Thank you for sharing your story, bro.
Yeah.
I could relate to a lot as an addict in recovery. I could identify with a lot. Lisa and I have been doing this now for a year or 2 years. I forget how long, but we've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people, and whenever we have somebody in recovery on here, I go on a journey with them, man.
Yeah.
Go on a journey, and thank you for taking me and everyone else listening to this on the journey with you from, the depths of human despair, the worst possible situations one could face in life. My sincere condolences for your friends, especially the one that you found early on after suicide. Suicide touched me as well, and touches so many people in these circles we run in. But, here we are, we're the ones living, we're the ones continuing to fight the good fight, if you will, right? And I took a ton of notes. I don't have nearly enough time to get into everything I wanted, but
oh, good.
CHINS, child in need of services. My parents will hear this later and identify with that too.
Yep.
The trash bag luggage, right? Yeah. I don't think you used those words exactly, but you said something.
But that's how we live.
Yeah. As soon as I felt unwanted, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right?
Fight or flight kicks in, and I'm gone.
Yeah. And if we can, your story is a textbook example of if we can only sit and stay for a moment, like your friend Eddie. I was thinking, like, I do AA and 12-step recovery, and there's Ebby that got the message to Bill to start AA, and you have your own Eddie that got the message to you to start ACT, right? And all the different connections there. And I just compared you to Bill Wilson. Enjoy that one.
I'll take it.
But right, because it's helping people. At the end of the day, it's about helping people. Like you said, the guy going to med school. How cool!
Yeah,
right. He stuck and stayed for a moment and was able to realize, like, hey, there's a better life out there, right? And he's going to seize it. So,
and what's cool, one other thing that's cool about that is when he went to I forget MCPAS, Mass School of Pharmacy to start. He's on his way to med school, but in the letter to get in there, when he had like the fears of doing it, because he had a gap in his schooling, right? So he went to South Carolina for college, had to leave because he was getting high, and I told him to be honest about it. He was viciously honest about his addiction and the gap, and they appreciated it so much that like he was turning his life around. He had a couple years at that point that like owning who you are, things can't be used against you. And I thought that was always a cool thing to get into that type of school, which now is, jumping him into med school after just graduating. I always thought that was some of the cooler parts is being able to be honest about it. Cause I know a lot of people don't have that opportunity. Same thing with one of the reasons I did advocacy was because there's a lot of people that can't share. Due to fear of losing your job, your career, the stigma that's associated to it. And even like public programs, you can't have a voice at the State House because it's publicly funded. So the people who would probably have the biggest thing, most changes that could be made, can't share their insight with politicians and, in their hearings, their testimony type stages, So just pretty cool stuff.
Very cool. We ask people. I don't know how long you want to go, Lisa, but I'm good for all morning if you are, Matt. We
I can
ask
talk a
people,
little bit.
yeah, me too, dude. Me too. That's a
Yeah,
gift of
yeah.
recovery. Um,
Mhm.
we ask people a lot about their favorite resource, whether it be a
Yeah,
podcast or a book or a movie or just what. Like, you talked about really high highs and really low
yeah.
lows in your
Hmm.
recovery journey. So, like, what's your go-to or one of your go-tos as a resource for Matt's recovery in order to continue to do the good work you're doing?
I would say people. People are my biggest resource. There's plenty of books that I go that I draw on inspiration. There's different podcasts, but I really believe the connection that I have. Like I've fortunately developed a really cool network of people that like have different experiences, strength struggles, and great advice, and people that can hold you accountable when you come in with different things that I'm trying to do or frustrations that I have that I can lean on my recovery network through every up and down. I think that's like the biggest resource for me is I have a beautiful network, and people that will tell me the truth, and if I'm messing up or where I can work on something a little bit better or give me the honest advice. Some other podcasts, Knocking Doors Down is a friend of mine that does a podcast that I always enjoy their guests when they have on. Just like hearing people's stories and experiences, I think always something that's pretty cool. You get to hear different things of what people went through, and like you were saying, Jesse, like when you're hearing somebody else share, it's like you can relate to where you are or were or whatever when you're hearing somebody go through their journey or trying to relate. Not just I think that that's something that's always been pretty cool to do. So,
And so
but
much
yeah,
of
great
what you
network.
say really makes me think of, like, I love that phrase, make your mess your message, right?
Mhm,
Like, and you've
mhm.
just completely lived that. And I just keep thinking about what a cool vehicle your poetry is, right? Because I imagine that it has the dual benefit, like any kind of recovery support, that I continuously hear from folks with lived experience, that it's a mutual benefit, right?
Yeah.
So your writing, looking back on it, sharing it with others, keeps that front of mind for yourself.
Yeah.
But it also allows you to put that out there and outreach to really the world, right? Like not just your small community, not Massachusetts, like nationally and beyond. Like it's just really, it's really cool.
I'll tell you, it wasn't always that cool. When I've always wrote, I didn't always share it with people. When I started really trying to make a push to put it out there, I got a lot of resistance on like you need to keep your mouth shut and you can't share about it because the way I wrote or the way that it came out, there was a lot of like negative feedback. I lost a lot of friends in the beginning because I was trying to better myself, and there's a freedom when I'm on stage performing that like I really enjoy. Like I really enjoy even at Aftermath when I'm doing a group on poetry. Like there's it's just a really beautiful feeling that I get from doing it. But like my son's mother early on didn't want me to share because she didn't want the world knowing that her kid's father was a heroin addict, like out there in the public. My father was like, put your head down and work 60 hours a week. And I don't know why you're wasting your time with poetry. It's never going to get you anywhere. And what's funny with him, he installs like blinds and curtains and window treatments and has a contract with Harvard, right? And I was on Chronicle years ago. They did like a little section. I did like some poetry. And the dean of one of the deans at Harvard or some bigwig at Harvard saw the section, called my father up and was like, you should be so proud of your son. My son's an addict and an alcoholic. And your son just gave me hope that my son's going to be able to get it. And my father, I don't think up until that point realized like the type of impact of putting that stuff out there. Cause he's not an emotional guy. Doesn't know how to express his feelings. Kind of like always wanted me to put it in the past. Like, all right, you're not that anymore. Let it go. Don't need you talking about it. Don't need you sharing about it. Like it's in the past. And from that point on, I think he realized like the type of impact that it's had. And I've been on a bunch, like Fox 25, Channel 5. Like I've done a bunch of interviews, been in the Herald. Boston Globe did something on me, and my father seeing all these things. I think he's proud of me. So that's always a cool thing. Because I know as a kid, it was one thing I was always driven to do and never felt like I ever accomplished it. So,
yeah. People notice, right? You talked about in your story, I don't think you said the word, but I kept hearing in my mind resilience, right?
Yeah,
put an obstacle
absolutely.
in front of me. I'll figure out a way to go through it, around it, bypass it, get somebody else to come in and help me accomplish whatever, right? And yeah, I can totally identify and relate with that in recovery. I'm blessed to know a ton of great people in recovery, as of yourself, and just the amazing goals that we get to accomplish just from being our authentic real self, right? So I just want to thank you for being your authentic real self. And not trying to spit shine an image, or not trying to like fit in a box and say, like the story you just told of the guy at Harvard, right? I had something recently, details aren't important, but like speaking at this major company, and they took a poll, and it was like, how many people are affected by substance use disorder? Like if you're affected, click yes. And 94% of this like national company, who you wouldn't think on the surface would even know about this, like yes. And then like I couldn't even get what I was trying to speak out because there was so many questions coming in about the Q&A, right? So I think this is like shining a flashlight in the dark, and there's just so much more need to help and get out there and do podcasts and like all this stuff. So,
well, we've come a long way. I mean, if you go back when I first started doing this, it was like there was nothing out there. There was no events. There wasn't a lot of people trying to share or not necessarily share, but like put it in a public setting the way there is now. Like the language, the discussion. Even when you go back to like my parents couldn't talk to people about, oh, my son's a heroin addict, because they'd all look like, what did you do wrong? You know what I mean? Not like, hey, your son suffers from a disease that's progressive, and he's still somebody's son. He's a child. He's a brother. He's a friend. He's a human. It would always be like, what's wrong with you? And nowadays, it's like there's so many different support groups, platforms. The support is there because it's now, back then it was like inner city is really what it was looked at, like the different problem areas, where now you can't go anywhere where addiction isn't affected. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, black or white, gay or straight. It literally has no boundaries, and it affects everybody equally. You know what I mean? And I think that breaking some of the stigma, having those discussions, having people being able to shine a light, like, hey, you can get clean, you can get sober, you can turn your life around, are like huge. And because people aren't as ashamed to share, like in a poll like that, like 96, 97, whatever percent of people click that they've been affected by. I've spoken at a ton of middle schools, high schools, and colleges. It's wild when you go to a middle school and you like a lot of my presentation, I'll ask like, who in here has been affected or knows somebody, and you got 6th, 7th, and 8th graders raising their hand because they've been affected by it. Their father, their mother, a friend, their brother, like it's such a prevalent issue. And I hope there's only more headway to make. I hope there's more opportunities to get people the treatment that they deserve. Hopefully one day we can. I'm a firm believer in the longer you stay in treatment, the better chance of success that you have, and that doesn't matter if you're at Dimick at a place like that or Passages Malibu. The longer you stay in treatment, the better chance you have at success. And part of battling with some politicians, it's like if we gave people the opportunity to go through a full thing of treatment earlier on, how many more lives would still be alive? If you can get to the CSS, if you can get to the TSS, if there was more halfway house beds that you guarantee right when you're in treatment, you're going to get 90 days to 6 months to 9 months and really give somebody that solid foundation. That's me getting clean was based off of the solid foundation that I started with. If I didn't have that hard, firm foundation in the beginning, that length of time, the other times that I was spun out and tried or got 30 days or got maybe a couple of months, those always ended up falling apart because I didn't have that foundation. I didn't have those building blocks that, early on were instilled in me.
and your brain needs time. And, one of the things you said, I think is a great, segue as you talked about kind of family and stigma. And, I know that, one of my good friends, one of our friends of the podcast, Maureen Kavanaugh, we've had her on a couple of times.
Maureen's been trying to adopt me for 10 years.
Yeah.
I love Maureen.
Class groups at Spectrum virtually on Wednesday nights. And I actually just reached out to her yesterday for a personal reason, right? And got a response within 30 seconds.
She's amazing. Yeah. I love her description of me too. In her book, she called me a babyface thug that would rob you and apologize. I have to do this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I remember that. For sure.
One of my favorite descriptions.
Like Maureen, we've had her on a couple of times. I'd love to, if you're open to it, have you back. I think we've got so much more to say. I think it's always great when we have somebody on and we hear so much of their story. And then podcast listeners get that background, that real conversation. Because I think there's so many cool things. I'd love to hear your perspective on treatment, like we were just talking more about. I'd love to hear more. I'd love to hear about your poetry group. Right? Like, how does that work? Integrating that kind of stuff into recovery, I think, is a real passion of mine too. And so taking that holistic approach for folks. So I'd love to have you back. We'd love to have you back if you'd be willing to come back.
Hopefully I'll be on time next time.
Oh yeah, don't worry about it. And then my Zoom broke. I mean,
I couldn't get out of update Zoom. I had a crisis downstairs. So I was like, oh man, they probably hate me.
Not
and then last week I couldn't, what was it last week? I couldn't even talk because I was so sick. So
happens.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better and got your voice back.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
Right. You need your voice.
Yep. Yeah.
We need you.
Trying to talk to you guys for an hour with a raspy voice, wouldn't have been working out too well for me. Yeah.
But Lisa mentioned Maureen, and I know as we're wrapping up here, I was actually thinking of Maureen. And she has a line she either said on the podcast or it's in her book talking about the stigma of parents. Yeah. And she says something about someone's sick, everyone brings over a casserole. And then, it's an empty table. Oh, there's all the casseroles for my kid that's struggling with addiction.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're talking about it, and I'm glad we're talking about it. And I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit here on this, Matt. Look forward to having you on again. Yeah, and who knows what the future has in store, right?
No, absolutely.
Well, this was a real gift, Matt. Thank you so much.
No problem.
We'll add some notes, to the episode. So if folks want to hear more about your poetry or they want to, hear more about you, we can get that information out there. And, I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this, for a while. So really happy to have you on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It's been an honor. Hopefully somebody gets something out of this, and looking forward to hopping on again, have a little discussion or debate in the future. So I'm all about it.
Awesome. Sounds good. And this is the shameless plug for our podcast time. If you like this stuff, if you're listening, if you're seeing on Facebook, subscribe. You can get this podcast anywhere on YouTube or anywhere podcasts are for free later today. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Matt. Bye.